welcome to The Conversation. On today's episode of Trailblazers, we talk to Dr. Cal Vardy, founder of Meducators UK. Cal talks to us about his journey to become a junior doctor and why he founded an organisation that helps students get careers in healthcare. We hope you enjoy this episode and be sure to subscribe.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. Today we're joined by Cal Vardy. Cal is a junior doctor working at Nottingham Hospital and he is the founder of Meducators UK. Meducators UK is an organisation that brings workshop sessions to children in schools that will inspire them into the healthcare industry. Today we're going to talk to Cal about his journey into the NHS and his pathway to becoming a doctor, what inspired Meducators, and his vision for the future. So without further ado, let's get into today's discussion. And I welcome to the podcast, Cal. Cal, lovely to have you here, mate.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
So obviously we touched on your work with Meducators and your journey into the NHS. You're a junior doctor now at Nottingham. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about what it is you're doing currently and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so working, as you've mentioned, as a junior doctor in my first rotation in obstetrics and gynecology. So that involves everything to do with women's health, delivery of babies, and obviously following up mums after their deliveries. It's very, very intense. But I've obviously, as mentioned, got Meducators in the background as well, ticking away.
Yeah. So Cal, tell us a little bit more about Meducators and where that came from.
Yeah, so Meducators started when I had a bright idea in my university accommodation room and thought, why wouldn't I just decide to go back to my old school and teach these students a little bit about what I do in my career. At the time, I was a first year medical student, so I didn't really have much clinical experience, so that's going into hospitals, working with patients. But what I did have is a lot of mates in the year above that did have that experience, and I thought, why wouldn't it be great to organise something back at my school in Woking, in Surrey. Spoke to a couple of teachers. My mum's actually a teacher at the school, but it was very difficult trying to get in because there was a new headmaster, all new different faces. And the school said, yeah, we'll have you along. And the reason why I set that up is because there's a lot of people coming in offering careers advice to students, and they might be at the end of their career, the latter stages. And that might not necessarily be appropriate for students, that they might not be, receptive towards what they're talking about. I remember we had a GP come in who was, 50, 60 years old, and me being, 14, 15, it's very different. And they tell us about what medical school was like in their days and what healthcare was like. And we'd had nurses come in and other allied healthcare professional courses. And as great as it was, I think I just wanted something a bit more, juicier, a bit more hands-on. So I decided with my friends, why don't we just purchase some equipment? At the time we weren't purchasing, we were borrowing a lot of equipment from the university. So things like tendon hammers to test reflexes, like stethoscopes to listen to the heart, but not just them listening and, hearing, lub-dub sound, a little bit more talking about the pathology. So things that might go wrong with the heart and what we do as doctors. And the school really liked it. And our local rival school, they said, we want you to come in as well. At the time, I thought, I'm medical school. I just genuinely don't have the time. And my medical school was at Keele, so that's kind of just outside of Stoke-on-Trent. Very different to kind of where I'd kind of been before. And it was really hard for me to travel back down to London, Surrey, where these schools were requesting us. And the best thing about it was a rival school, and they used to beat us all the time in football, basketball, back in the day. So I thought, go on. And they said, what's your company number? And at this point, I think I was 21. I had no clue what setting up a business was, what company's house was, anything like this. And I thought, I'll ask a couple of my friends, see what I can do. We incorporated the company and spoke to my dad. My dad's the brains behind the name Meducators. I think I called
Excellent.
it at first.
I should hire him as a brand consultant, clearly.
He keeps reminding me about that. But we were called, I think we had a different name. And then the bank I was... that I used for my business banking said, you can't use that name because someone else in Germany has a name similar to it. And they asked me to kind of like change the name, and it was all a bit of an issue at the time. Anyway, I think it was called Meducational at first, and we changed it to Meducators. And it went really well. And this school, the local rival school, they said, how much, will it cost for our students? And at the time, we do everything for free, and we still do today. Any student that's from a pupil premium or free school meal, the courses are completely free for. And yeah, we went with that school. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, and yeah, we're now kind of in, I think, just over 170 schools in the UK. We've also gone to Northern Ireland, which was our first international sort of Meducators event, working with some schools in Europe and as well in the Middle East as well. So it's great.
It's incredible, man. It's lovely to hear about your journey. And I think for those that, obviously, I know you.
Yeah.
For those at home who don't know you, what ignited your passion in healthcare? What really drove you to get... You mentioned that your parents are both teachers. Where was your step into medicine from?
It's a difficult one, really. The stereotype being maybe I'm from an Indian background. My parents wanted to do me, wanted
Become
me
a
to do
doctor,
it.
become an engineer, become a lawyer, become
Yeah.
an accountant.
Yeah.
They're safe careers.
No, that genuinely wasn't ever the case. My parents said, do whatever you want to do. I genuinely believe it was at a point, maybe in year 13, the end of my A-levels, genuinely didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was good at science, I knew I enjoyed it, but I didn't know whether it was for me. I think at one point I wanted to become an astronaut, and I looked into what that involved and all of the training you have to do. I thought, oh, sack it, that's not for me. And I loved space, but I also liked learning about, the innate machine that is the human body.
That's really interesting that there's things that you've spoken about previously and that you just touched on there that made me think about the power of something like Meducators. But what if Tim Cook had come in? Not Tim Cook. What's the guy?
Steve Jobs?
No, not Steve Jobs. The chap, the British guy that went into space. I can't remember his name. He does a masterclass and all of that sort of stuff. Okay. But imagine someone like that, an astronaut, had actually come in to you and your school, year 13, and given you a little inspirational workshop, show you some of the stuff that would have happened on
I've become an astronaut,
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah. It's very different to what we're doing. I wouldn't ever put myself in his shoes, but no, it's great, obviously, that we can go into schools and offer the advice we do. But the main reason of why I wanted to go into healthcare was really because I believe I've got quite a lot of empathy behind me. I genuinely like understanding about people's backgrounds, what they're kind of going through in life. And the way I actually decided that medicine or a healthcare career was for me is I actually took a gap year after my year 13, and I worked in a hospital local to me in a oncology department, so that's cancer. And I remember my first week, I was an 18-year-old, and I applied for the job when I was 17, and NHS jobs at the time, so you can't apply 17 years old. It just kept, flagging me down. I changed my age to 18, and then I called them up and I said, I will be 18 at the time of the interviews. Can I have this job? And they turned around and said, fine. This kid's too inquisitive. Like, he's really, really bugging us now. So they probably gave me the kind of go ahead, and I went to the interview and I rocked up in a suit, and to my kind of disbelief, I thought everyone else would be kind of like suited and booted. It's my first ever job, and I was the only one there, and people were looking at me like, what's this guy coming for? It was a healthcare assistant role. For me, a job's a job. You've got to really prepare, and I prepared the night before what I was going to discuss, what I was going to talk about, and managed to get the job. And it was actually for a receptionist job I applied for, and they said, no, actually, we think you're better suited to this oncology role. Speak to this this lady who became my boss, lovely lady, Deneen, and she was, I think, really happy with my application, and she said you'd be a perfect fit. And what they had done is people that wanted to go into medicine or other kind of healthcare related careers, these students were kind of going to this department, and they're obviously seeing what someone with cancer might be going through and learning a little bit about not just the diagnosing and the biological aspect of treating, but the psychological aspects as well, and the social aspects, and it was really, really it was a bit of a, best way to describe it, it was an eye-opener. So one day I'd call a patient in, call their name. My job was helping organise transport, calling patients into the room, doing their height and weight, dipping their urine, that sort of stuff, you know, writing down their blood test results. But there'd be some weeks where you'd call a patient in, and then you'd call them again, or you'd try to call them home, and they say, unfortunately, you know, my mum or dad, or, you know, my brother, sister, they've passed away. And that was a bit of an eye-opener. I remember going home that day and I just speaking to my parents, and I was like, oh, that was pretty hard take.
It's a tough ask of an 18-year-old.
I know, and that's the thing, being exposed to something like that at the age of 18, I think for anyone out there that's looking to obviously get any experience, and it's quite difficult post-COVID, obviously getting hospital-related experience, any experience, whether that be, you know, working in a supermarket, working in a care home, anything that gives you the experience of working with a customer or someone that you have to, you know, a client, for example, in any business, they are what runs the business. They are the kind of pedestal behind everything. And for me at 18, you know, hearing about these patients, you know, passing away, and we'd have, you know, great stories, obviously, of patients, you know, surviving and, you know, going to remission, which was fantastic. But it was something that kind of made me think, yeah, this is the career for me.
Yeah. I'm trying to wrap my noodle around the fact that the passion that you had for something was so great at 18 that you had the resilience to not fold when confronted with those situations. And I think you spoke about the fact that you've got this natural empathy for people, but I think there's a resilience that underlies that strength to, you know, be able to actually deal with hearing that someone that you've spoken to probably a couple of days previously, who you might have had a perfectly pleasant conversation with, is sadly no longer with us. Yeah. And I think the question that I've got with regards to that is, how much did that teach you about your own resilience, those experiences, and how do you bring that to what it is you're doing now?
So thinking back, so in terms of kind of bouncing back from these situations and dealing with obviously passings and difficulties, I have obviously a great team, you know, around me. The NHS is great for that. There's really supportive members of staff. You know, I had consultants that kind of took me under their wing when I wanted to get into medicine. You know, they knew I wanted to. So they said, what can you see on the scan, or what do you think about this? Even though that wasn't my role at the time, I was, you know, as a healthcare assistant, they would try to make me, you know, interested in what their career is, and every kind of different speciality you go to, they tried to say, oh, why don't you become a vascular surgeon, or why don't you become an oncologist, why don't you become a neurosurgeon? And it's very interesting. But in terms of how it's made me today, the resilience, it's very difficult because I think I'm still junior. I'm you know, I'm not years into qualified. I've only, you know, qualified two years ago. It's hard for me to kind of describe, but what I do think I do have is that when you're confronted by patients with, you know, really difficult issues that you can relate to, or you might have had a family member that's passed away, you know, you think of those things. Unfortunately, I lost my grandmother this year, but every, you know, elderly lady I meet, I think of a little bit of her in them, and that kind of gets me through things. So even though they might not have family themselves, I'll always go that extra mile to make sure. And, you know, members of staff have said, oh, you have a great, you know, patient manner, and you're really good, you'll make a great doctor, but, you know, not perfect. There are things I'm not great at. But I think the experiences I had definitely when I was 18, and I obviously, throughout my undergraduate degree, I still went back to that healthcare assistant job. I still made sure I was, one, obviously had to have some pocket money for university, especially living in South London, but it made me realise why I wanted to do it. Hope that answers the question.
It does. And it makes me think that even though your path, and I'm talking in general terms about other kids that may be going into, you know, other careers, or they're thinking about going into the world of work, how actually even the stuff that you were experiencing as an 18-year-old working as a healthcare assistant, giving you those skills to deal with difficult situations, to be exposed to that, to develop the resiliency, you know, you can apply that to your business. You can apply that to when you're talking to schools and you're trying to, you know, get new schools to commit to workshops for the years and stuff like that, and you're getting knockbacks and you're getting these, you know, rejections. I can imagine that there's very similar things, and there's life skills within that that actually would be of enormous benefit to, to kids who are looking to go into the world of work. But then also within that, it gives you empathy. It gives you the ability to talk to people about difficult topics. It gives you so many soft skills that even if you weren't doing anything within the healthcare space on a long term as your vision, going in and operating as a healthcare assistant, going in and maybe, working in an old people's home to kind of like talk to the people that are there, and those skills are so applicable to life outside of, not just the healthcare industry or medicine or wherever. They're applicable in all manner of walks of life. And that's where I think what you're doing with Meducators and showing that possible route, because that's the thing, you're not creating this sales funnel where you're driving people into to healthcare. You're just showing them what's possible, and you're showing them an opportunity and the benefit of your story. Someone who is more relatable from an age point of view. You are not a 60-year-old,
not quite anymore.
40 year vet as a doctor. You are much more relatable in terms of age, and you can give these kids a little bit more insight into the realities of the current system and the way things are now. Talk to me about the workshops that you run. Talk to me about the structure of the day, how you get the engagement with the kids, and how you get them excited about the opportunities that are within healthcare.
Yeah, of course. So traditionally a school would approach us and say, could you come in and run a careers, workshop day, whether that be for medicine or for veterinary or for dentistry, and we'd bring in like-minded individuals, like you've just mentioned, into the school, and they might be, just qualified, just about to qualify, but will have had some clinical experience. So these are people that obviously all enhanced DBS checked, because we obviously have to work with patients, so it becomes great obviously working with schools, and there's that kind of professionalism as well as obviously risk assessments all sorted. When we work with the school will either want us to do it in a school hall, in a kind of carousel based activity, or in multiple different classrooms. Obviously we'll make it bespoke to the school, what they're looking for, and the day will involve multiple different avenues of things that are within the national curriculum, but we go that extra clinical layer on top. So for example, as mentioned before, in science, students in year 9 onwards might learn about the reflex arc. So that's things like motor neurons, sensory neurons, the relay neurons. And when you read that in a book, I remember me being year 10, I didn't know.
Glaze over.
Yeah, pretty much a glaze over, literally. And it was very, very hard for me to kind of think, how can I implement something to do with the reflex arc, but in clinical practice? And I thought, well, tendon hammers. So you might all know about the knee jerk reaction that you see, you whack someone on the knee, and
I'm still alive.
Yeah, you're still alive. But obviously we go into the kind of fundamental of what that actually means, and the kind of best way of describing it is sort of like, when you were a kid and you used to have a light switch and you put it halfway between being on and halfway between being off. That's pretty much what that kind of reflex is. It's not enough for the body to go, oh, I'm going to completely straighten the leg, but it's enough for it to kind of go, oh, that's where the reflex is. And these are part of the kind of peripheral nervous system. Won't go into too much medical jargon. But what we do is we then do kind of 5 other different reflexes. So we teach them some in the upper limb, the triceps reflex, biceps, brachioradialis, all of these different things that the students might find interesting. And they get to obviously use the hammers, that's the practical aspect, but also the relatability of what they've already learned in their science lessons. So we'd obviously have workbooks, booklets, presentations of the day of showing, oh yeah, I know what that is, oh, it makes sense. And the best way of me describing how I find it relatable or useful with the students is, it's a bit like when you're in maths and you ask your teacher, when am I ever going to learn about algebra? When will I ever do that in my life? And they'll say, oh, if you go into, roller coaster engineering, or if you do this, or if you go into accounting finance. But for medicine, it's very different. You might be in science, or why do I need to learn about reflexes? Well, you're a human body, but as a doctor, we have to learn about those things all the time. So it's just adding that clinical layer on top to make it relatable. And the schools love that, because obviously it's kind of synoptic learning, really. It's what they learn at school and what we're learning as professionals. And they like the fact that, we are not that much older than them as well. So it's that relatability aspect as well. That will change. I'm getting very far away. So a lot of my staff that go in that are brilliant, they will be doing that in the future. And hopefully I can oversee that process and move it forward.
So any plans to introduce any of the VR elements? I know that we've spoken about the hammers and the tools that you're using kind of at the workshop sessions, but you know, we're seeing the adverts for the training of the surgeons in the virtual reality space. Any plans to bring any of that sort of new tech and innovation stuff that's happening in the NHS? And
we have dental and the surgical parts of the organisation where we've incorporated a lot of manual dexterity. So, for example, in our dental workshops, they'll be they'll be doing fillings on structures that they've made out of kind of stone. They'll be using things like alginate to take kind of impressions. So we've got that side of things. In terms of the kind of VR headsets, not quite there yet, but I think we will be in the future. What we do though in our kind of dental workshops is using things like Invisalign. You might have heard of that. Obviously,
Yep.
the kind of teeth straightening business. And they kind of take 3D shapes of the mouth. We'll do that. We'll demonstrate that to the students, show them how that's being used, obviously, today. And not just for teeth straightening, can be used for all different, applications within dentistry. We've got a really good surgical team that are putting together a lot of things at the moment as well. But VR headsets soon come.
cool, that's super exciting. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about Meducators is probably the depth and breadth that you can show that exists within healthcare, because it's not just about being a doctor or being a surgeon or being one of the usual things that you think of. What are some of the other areas that you expose kids to in terms of what the art of the possible is within that realm?
Yeah, so there's so many things we show them about. It's not just, I think when you're a student, the practical nature and think, oh, you think doctor, or you think surgeon, that might be someone's instant thing. You don't tend to think of the other different, hundreds of specialities there are. What we do focus on is the obviously importance of the communication between the patient. So in some of our stations, we do some medical ethics, and we talk about the art of the doctor-patient relationship, and how important it is to have that rapport.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, if it's more one-sided and the doctor making all the decisions, how that patient might not, be receptive to the information that they're receiving, how they might not really go home and think, did that doctor answer my question? The best way to kind of think about it is there's a gentleman called George Engel, I think it was in the 70s, I can't remember, but there was something called the biopsychosocial model. You might have heard of it, but it was kind of splitting the way we view kind of medicine up. So the biological, psychological, and social aspects. And we will go into that in a little bit more depth. So rather than us just banging on about doing suturing or, opening up a body and telling about the anatomy, how important that kind of two-way effective communication is. So we do a lot of kind of medical ethical questions. Maybe we'll go through one today and see what you'll go for. But they're all kind of hot topics and things we have to go through. And the staff that will always go on the day will be using, their own experience within healthcare. Obviously, all means confidential and not detailing the exact details behind it, but telling these students about the difficulties they might go through. Just touching on a point you mentioned earlier about, having exposure within a job or within my time as a healthcare assistant, how important that can be. I had one student come up to me and he was writing his personal statement and he said, Dr. Cal, actually not Dr. Cal, she said, Cal, I'm finding it really difficult to get work experience. I've been calling all of these hospitals, all these care homes, say I need to be 18. I've tried volunteering, all the space is taken. And I asked him, okay, fine, do you have a part-time job or anything like that? He goes, yeah, I work in Sainsbury's. I said, okay, that's great. And he goes, well, how can I write about, how's that relatable to medicine in my personal statement? I said, okay, well, let's talk it through. So what's your job? He goes, oh, well, I deal with, the online orders. And if the online orders are wrong, I have to obviously deal with the customers' complaints and help organise my team. And I said, perfect. And he was kind of looked at me a little bit baffled and said, well, how's that relatable to medicine? I said, so you're delegating responsibility within a team. That's what people in medicine do daily. Whether you're in a surgery and, you know, having to say, I need this or I need that, or whether you're a consultant that's making decisions on what might happen to their patient, it's really important. And then he also said he was dealing with the customer complaints. I said, well, that's very similar to dealing with, you know, disgruntled or unhappy, you know, families within hospitals. So, you know, what's happening with my mum or dad? I haven't heard from this, you know, what's going on? What's the plan? You still have to be there for them. And you can definitely relate, you know, your personal statement to that. So I said, write everything, you know. And there's one thing we taught at school, I don't know if you had it, but it was kind of point evidence explanation, and I think there's now developed P chains or P chains. I used to see them laminated on the walls at the school, and I used to think, what a load of rubbish. Now I realise how important that is, because when I was writing my personal statement, you make a point, what you do, you know, explain a little bit about why that has been important for you wanting to be a doctor or a nurse or, you know, a physio, whatever it may be in the future, and then develop on those points. And I just told them, do that. You know, you're delegating responsibility, showing leadership qualities, which maybe someone who wants to go into medicine or be a doctor might be like. You're dealing with, you know, dissatisfied customers, which you can obviously correlate that to people and families coming in that want to know a little bit about their parents or whatnot. And he started to kind of understand and put something together, and he got into medical school at the end of the day, which is great. No thanks to me, he was a very able student, but that's the thing. I think you get a lot of really bright students that will get top grades across the board, which is fantastic. And you obviously do need that if you want to go into a medical career, because the grades are quite high, and I think they're in the process of trying to change all of that now. But some of these students might have not had that experience of a job or a life experience, and don't want to say some of them, but some people might have always had things handed to them, and it can be a little bit difficult. So you might have them being completely book smart, all in the books, but when they meet their first patient, they find it hard to kind of, you know, show empathy or show that compassion. And I think with life experience, you really do get that. And that's what we tell these students at the workshops, that it's not all about being the best at school, being, you know, the top of the class, because at medical school at the end of the day, if you do get in, whether you finish at the top or the bottom, you still graduate as a doctor. But yeah.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting that so many of the soft skills and the principles are universal for communication, it seems. You know, we have this concept internally of, you know, related to kind of the decision-making tree and how you get from quoting for a project or putting in a proposal to getting the final, you know, agreement for that. And it's about creating psychological safety. It's about being clear about what the parameters are, explaining all the terminology, explaining all of the things that are going to go on in that process when there's, you know, things that someone might not know.
Yeah.
And that enables them to make a decision more positively. And it's exactly the same thing with, you know, a doctor explaining to someone in post-operative care, okay, or explaining a procedure that they may go through. This is what's going to happen. This is why we're going to do this. And this is, you know, what that journey will look like for you. And that enables a comfort in that decision. You feel on board with it. You can then explain that to your family, and kind of they can help you arrange care and whatnot. But that comes from having a human empathy. It comes from a skill that you develop when you interact with people. And as you said, with that lovely example about that, you know, that young lad who worked in a supermarket, was able to delegate and show responsibility, like leadership, and delegate those responsibilities, able to deal with a customer complaint in a high stress situation. Someone may have had a present that they're trying to get. It hasn't arrived on the time, or it's broken when it arrives. They're anxious and they're trying to get that sorted out. So yeah, he's enabled he's been given those skills, not given them, but developed those skills to deal with those situations. And so much of that is amplified in the healthcare realm and the world in which they operate, that I think there's so much applicability. And it's really funny to me how so many of those communication, you know, pillars they just apply across all of the working world. You know, we have this kind of simplify, amplify, ignite kind of framework that we use, and it's very, you know, it's very similar to kind of like you simplify the messaging so that you can make it really clear and communicate in a language that anyone can understand, so that amplification of that message means that they can then communicate that out, and their more benefit is able to be realised. And it's the same thing with that messaging around, okay, this is why you're going to have the treatment, and then you can explain it, and then you ignite that engagement or ignite that fire to kind of say, yes, cool, I understand that, and I'm going to do this rehab protocol post-surgery, or whatever that might be. With the kids that you mentioned there that are maybe not from quite as fortunate backgrounds, who maybe are not from those, it might not be from a private school, or they just simply might be from kind of like more challenging backgrounds or whatever. Is there work that you do within Meducators, and schools that help those kids? And is there situations that you've seen within that are, things that you've had a hand in kind of like showing a pathway to someone who maybe thought, and they came up to you and they said like, oh, Dr. Cal, I don't think, I thought I needed to be like a straight A student, or I need to do this, or I need to be this. Have you been able to change some of those perceptions with the workshops?
No, we've definitely had a lot of success stories of some students that thought they might never get into a subject because, as you mentioned, they thought the grades were too high. And I think now there's a lot that's being done to try and help convert those that might not necessarily have the grades get in through other means. So like I didn't get the A-level grades I needed to get in straight into medicine. I had to do a degree first, and then I got in that way. And I tell these students about that, and there are a lot of them now that I work with and I see at the school that I see a little bit of me in them, and I think, don't worry, I was there. And they look at me and they think, oh, but you're a doctor now, like you're living life. And I thought it's very different to that, but
80-hour weeks,
yeah,
and
not quite 80, but I've done some difficult weeks. But these students that might not necessarily believe they have the skill set or even maybe the mindset to get into medicine or any other healthcare career at that time have spoken to their teachers, and they've said, look, could we either have a chat with the Meducators team, or they'll be coming in, and I've spoken to those students and I've told them a little bit about what they can be doing. Try and get that experience. Try and look at other means of getting in. If you're not going to get the grades now because you've done too little and it's too late, look at next year. Maybe think about a gap year. And I remember taking gap year, and at the time I thought, am I doing the right thing? But that gap year was probably the best thing I've ever done, because I had that job within the oncology setting. It gave me a life experience that maybe not many other 18-year-olds at the time would have done. But what it did allow me was to kind of hone on those compassionate skills, the empathy, and you can't learn that. It can be quite difficult for some people to kind of get those skills. But what I tell the schools, whenever I went to a local school, I said, try and reach out to this organisation, or I just kind of signpost them. These guys have got, a free volunteering service where you can help serve meals to patients, and you don't have to, it's not a paid job, but you can be 16 and above and do these mealtime. And just that exposure would give those students that bit of insight for them to go, actually, I might be interested in this. So yeah, sorry, rambled on a bit, because your question was really about what was it about where they could get in.
I think what you've touched on there is really actually quite beautiful in the mindset, that you're trying to change the mindset in students that may think that I don't have, the academic ability to go into this line of work or to play any role in this.
Yeah.
But they may have bucket loads of empathy, of more human qualities. So the work that you're doing to show them that actually, look, you don't need to just be a surgeon. You don't need to just be a doctor. You could be a phlebotomist, you could be a nurse, you could be a physio, you could be some other, part of this spectrum. Creating the mindset that this is possible is the first step on that journey. And I think that that's a really important aspect of the work that you're doing within that. Coming back to that mindset, how do you engage with the schools themselves, actually, and encourage them to explain how important that mindset shift is, so that you get the buy-in from them to do the workshops?
Yeah, it's become easier as we progressed, because obviously we've got a reputation now with what we do within the organisation. At first it was difficult, but it just took one school to see what we did for others to kind of want to be
From
involved.
small acorns.
Yeah, it's become pretty big in that aspect, from going from not having any schools within the organisation to 170 plus today. It's been fantastic, and there's a lot of great individuals at schools, and there's a lot of teachers that really, really want their students to be something. I remember being at school and I used to think, oh, they're setting me all this homework, doing all this thing, and they obviously have to hit quotas and obviously have lesson plans, but they put in a lot of work, and I'm a bit biased because I see the work my parents, obviously both being teachers, they put in, and I see how important it is. You can really see the change and the shift in the mindset of students. Like, my parents probably at the end of the year or leaving day receive more cards than I've ever received in my life. And just last night, my dad he works in special educational needs schools, and he got a card from one of his students who was leaving, and it was just like, you're the best teacher I've ever met. Here's a plant, and this plant will ward off, evil spirits and things. Like, just make sure you water it every day. I can't remember the details, but it just those small things make you go, oh, that's why I want to do what I'm doing. And the careers advisors at schools, or it'll be head of the kind of sixth forms, or maybe even head teachers or head of science. That's for obviously the Meducator side of thing. We've now branched out into different other careers with one of our other organisations that we work with to do things like law, engineering as well, forensic science, etc. But with the careers advisors at the school, they're the people that really kind of buy into what we do. They've kind of have to have a careers pathway. And there's one school we work with in Surrey called Gordon School, and they do a fantastic job. We've worked with them for a number of years. They were one of the first schools we worked with. Shout out to the careers advisor there. She knows who she is. She does a really fantastic job in trying to set up a careers plan, not just for medicine. This is in all aspects. And what they realise is having like-minded individuals, people, young upcoming professionals within that, within those professions is really important. And I think that's one way in which they really like us coming in. We offer that support, and there's always the after support that we offer as well. If a student goes, oh, could I ask you some questions, completely free of charge, please speak to me, because I see you in me, and I want to help as many students as we can. And we'll bring in obviously our nurses, we'll bring in the physios. We're now hoping to look into bring in pharmacy and like all the allied health professions. It's not just about medicine. That's one thing I want to reiterate. Obviously, me being a doctor, I've done a biomedical science degree in the past, and we are called Meducators, but we offer all aspects of the healthcare, that allied healthcare professional courses.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, because as I said, I think it's not just limited to one particular pathway that someone may get exposed to, and then encouraging that mindset of growth to be able to say, there is other stuff possible out there is massive. Within the healthcare, the NHS and the work that's available now, what's some of the biggest opportunity spaces that you're seeing kind of opening out? Are there those things that, we need more of coming in, and or is it everywhere? Like I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole with this one, but, are there things that you see as an opportunity spaces, whether that's, in the area of not just kind of like treating of direct and acute conditions, maybe more lifestyle medicine, maybe more areas where we can be looking after our longevity and making, preventative interventions?
Yeah, of course. I think if you see on Instagram, daily there's a new study that's found that this has led to this, and the traditional kind of approach of medicine is kind of becoming phased out of doctor giving you medicine, take medicine, feel better. There's more to it, and what you've mentioned there, the kind of preventative aspect is really important. So kind of health education and health literacy is massive within the country.
What's the size of the growth market from, like, obviously, how many schools are there in the UK?
when I last looked, like in terms of that, were eligible for what we do, it's over 3,500 schools.
Oh, wow. So you've still got quite a way to go if you were to get into every school.
Yeah,
You've got 170 at the moment,
yeah.
3,500. You've still got another 3,330 that you could go to.
And again, it's schools, it's very tight, you know, in terms of budgets. Schools will have allocated budgets for students, but yeah, it's hard to tap into that. But we've obviously worked with about 18,000 students in person, which we're really pleased with, and it's grown. So when COVID happened, I thought, oh, my little hobby's gone, that's fine, let's go back to being a doctor. And then when schools started reopening, we were flooded with kind of emails of, please can you come to school, we've heard about this, please can you come in. And that's what we just want to continue doing. And I didn't set it up as a means of me being an entrepreneur or me having some sort of business mind. I never did. It was just, I love teaching, I love what I do, why not put two and two together and go into my old school, go into local schools and tell them a little bit about what we do, you know?
I think that there's no price that you can put on inspiration. You know, showing kids the art of the possible, where from any number of different backgrounds, it's one of the challenges that that we're facing more and more is, what can you do to inspire?
Yeah.
What can you do to show someone what's possible where they don't think something might be possible? You know, self-esteem, whatever challenges may be there. Going in and doing a practical workshop, saying to someone that there's, you know, any number of possibilities that even exist in this, you blow out that ecosystem so that you're showing them, you know, it's not just this kind of like tiny thing, it's this much bigger world or universe that you could operate within. And then carrying that into other, you know, industry sectors, whether that's, like you said, law, or whether it's engineering or other things. That's huge, because it means that you are being a part of a bigger societal change, and that's something that Meducators, or as it will be growing into other areas, maybe there's going to be a name change, I don't know, we'll have a hand in, which is an amazing and beautiful thing. So that's incredible. With where your journey started, and as you said there, you started this as you didn't think it was going to be anything. You thought it was going to be like a little hobby that maybe you'd do.
Still feels like that, but yeah.
What's your ambitions for the future?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm still practicing as a doctor. I actually took the year out after I qualified from medical school because we were inundated with inquiries and people asking us to come to the school. So I thought we can grow this to a position where there is some scalability. Be fantastic, and I'm glad I made that decision. Possibilities, as cliche as it is, are endless, because there's different avenues of obviously which we can go into, whether that not just be for healthcare allied professional courses, but for things like engineering, for things like accounting and finance. And there are a lot of places out there that do this sort of stuff. But in terms of the market within schools and the organisations that we work with, I think we're probably one of the other ones doing that at the moment, at this current time. I haven't been turned away from any schools because they work with anyone else, which is a good thing. But we have had schools say, you know, what you do is a lot better than what other people do. And that's no brag, it's just because I know when we go into a school, we want to meet the needs of those students. For example, if we're going to initially when we set this out, it was, you know, for local state schools. I went to a local state school, local comprehensive school, should I say, and I felt great knowing that the students I was working with, and then we had, you know, people from grammar and private schools reach out to us, can you come in? And the relatability, obviously, to those students is they want someone that's relatable to them. One time when we went to a school in Manchester, it was an all-girls school, and I knew that the majority of the student body was from Black, Asian, minority ethnic background. So what we did was we took a lot of our tutors, including myself, and went to this school. We wanted those students to see the relatability to us. And I remember one of my very close friends, she won't mind me saying, is that she's wears a hijab, she's of Islamic faith. And the students said, "Oh, miss, you're a doctor, but can you do surgery if you're wearing a hijab? Like, how does that work?" And as you know, as cute and as lovely as that was, it was just that kind of harmless comment, but just for them, they felt they couldn't be that person because of, you know, who they were. And that's the extra mile we go. We'll make sure that we're catering to students that will, find us relatable. Probably gone about too much into relatability, but I think that's what sets us aside, really.
No, I don't think that there is ever too much in the relatability, because fundamentally you only know that something's possible if you can relate to the person that's delivering the message. Anytime that you deliver a message, it has to be done in a way that you can be receptive to it. And the way that you're delivering that is through people that, you know, if you hold a mirror up to yourself and you see someone that looks like you giving you that message, it's easier to receive it. And I actually think that's a really powerful thing that you've been able to recognise and that you're providing these kids. And, you know, to have the experience to be able to talk to someone is incredible. Like, it's just, it's a game changer. So for me, I think I don't think there's ever too much you can bang on about relatability. I think it's a really powerful tool in your arsenal that actually is your point of difference, and actually showing that you go that extra mile to find those, you know, those surgeons, those physios, those people that go into the schools and say, I was like you. And the same thing even with your educational background. Like, you did a degree, you got a different pathway into the career that you were passionate about. There is no one size fits all. There is, you know, a different path for everyone, and that's, again, art of possible, and showing what you're able to kind of achieve through something like Meducators.
Oh, got to shed a tear after that thing.
Oh, you charmer.
No.
Mate, it's great that we touched on some of the ambitions, but, you know, are there other plans in the works for, obviously you've got 170 schools now. What's the growth trajectory that you're looking to achieve? How many more schools could you work with? What are you looking to kind of do in the next, you know, what's your now near next, your 6, your 12, your 36 months?
I'll be very honest, that shows you how kind of not business minded I am, and how much being a doctor is kind of taking over my world in a great way. I haven't yet kind of put those, obviously, figures down on paper of what we want to do. Something that we're discussing every day. We've got a lot of members on our team that are full-time now, which is great, and we've got a lot of members that are part-time, and we've got over 200 tutors that will come and do our workshops every now and then. In terms of where we want to be, is we want to just continue growing. We never want to have any, you know, stagnation. We just want to continue with what we're doing here in the UK. But as mentioned, we've had, you know, schools in Europe, in places like Spain reach out to us. We've had places in the Middle East reach out to us. It's just about whether I can get the time, because my work schedule is really busy, and I love my job being a doctor. Like, I generally would never say I don't want to do it. It just becomes, you know, it does take over your life. And I'm only in my junior years, and things will get better. But yeah, won't go.
No, but that's. It's the challenge when you have two passion projects that I suppose are so noble in their endeavour. You want to use the knowledge that you've accumulated and use that to best effect as a doctor and to be of service. And equally, you want to create opportunities with Meducators through the work that you're doing to provide kids with a light and a pathway through to being involved in the world that you've been lucky and enough to enjoy. And so exactly, why not be able to do both? It's just, you know, finding the time, I guess.
Finding the time.
So with that being said, tell us a little bit more about, you know, what is it being a doctor entail? How's that working for you right now? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, my team, they're incredibly supportive. Got a really good group of the nursing team, the medical team, even the rota coordinator team, and my immediate F1 team, so not Formula One, Foundation Year 1 doctors. They're fantastic people, really get on with them well, and it's just a really supportive environment. And I think that's the best thing to have, obviously, in any workplace, but particularly in a medical workplace where you can have some really difficult days. And as a junior, we don't have to go into surgery all the time unless we really want to, or you don't have to always be going and doing the most hands-on stuff. Your role as a junior is to really kind of aid the ward with making sure that the daily jobs are done and these patients are getting better, and reporting that on to your senior staff, and then coming up with plans and decisions and making sure that, you know, the top doctor signs that sort of stuff off. And I like that. I really enjoy being a part of the team, and it's almost like when you've got a great team around you, the work really gets, you know, it gets done. The main bit for me is why I enjoy being a doctor, again, is the patients. Like, as cliche as that is, you meet some people from really different walks of life, and you can really resonate with a lot of them, particularly if they're, you know, going through something similar that you've gone through. As I mentioned before, obviously, if you've lost someone in your family, you might attribute that love or that passion you had for that person in kind of every other patient that you see, and that really goes a long way. And I'm at the moment working in obstetrics and gynecology, so that's kind of women's health medicine. As mentioned before, some days we might be called to the birthing unit, so to help with patients that might have been giving birth, putting in cannulas, for, you know, really big cannulas for patients that are going through different stages of labour. You might get called to help with some C-sections one day. There might be someone on the postnatal ward who might be a little bit unwell after their pregnancy, and then in the kind of gynecology department is, you know, all aspects of women's health, people coming in and kind of problem solving, working out what's going wrong, and how you can obviously help them, and whether they need to, if they're unwell enough that they need to be admitted, or whether you can put things in place to make sure they do go home well and with the right information. So it's great. It's kind of all encompassing, and I actually picked it as my kind of first job because I really enjoyed it at medical school. I thought obstetrics and gynae, it's, so you've got medical jobs and you've kind of got surgical jobs, and that's kind of like your medical, your core medical jobs are things like cardiology, respiratory, gastroenterology, and your surgical jobs, colorectal surgery, you know, etc. Whereas obstetrics and gynae, it's a combination of the both. So you've got the medical side of obviously the patients, but also that surgical aspect too, of having to go into theatre and maybe things like delivering babies, or, you know, other kind of women's health related surgeries.
Incredible. So where does your journey take you next with your finishing up your junior years?
So in your junior years, you do a number of rotations. So I'll do kind of 4 months obstetrics and gynae. So it's not the same for everyone. This is just my rotation. So I've got 4 months of O&G, 4 months of respiratory, so yeah, lungs and whatnot, and then 4 months of colorectal surgery. After that, I'll be doing 4 months of GP, 4 months of ENT, so that's ear, nose and throat, which I'm really looking forward to, and that be assumed next year in an F2 rotation. So that's kind of like a senior house officer role, for F2 for those that know it now. And then after that, I will be doing gastroenterology. So it's a nice mix, and these are all kind of jobs that I wanted. And I've got some really good friends with me, some from medical school living close to me, which is great. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it. And I think that's where I am at the moment. Got something really good with Meducators, and I love doing. It's just, I can't be everywhere at once, so delegating with any organisation is really difficult, but something I have to learn to do. And obviously delegating, learning in my actual job, being a doctor. So yeah, lots going on at the moment. Yeah,
it sounds like it. Is there a particular specialism in mind for you and the future, or
yeah, not quite as early days yet? Yeah,
yeah. It sounds like it sounds like you're getting a lot of exposure to different things, and you know, I don't think that's probably going to become clear for a while, but I had to ask the question.
Yeah, the thing is, you get to kind of a stage where you appreciate the roles that everyone does in a hospital. And there's one point as a medical student, I thought, why can't you be a generalist? Why can't you do everything? And I thought, well, if I be a GP, kind of, I actually like the in-hospital medicine, but you can be a GP with a special interest. They're called a gypsy, and you can basically maybe work in A&E 1 day a week, or you could be doing, you know, minimally invasive surgeries as a GP. Like as mentioned, the possibilities are endless. You could go abroad, you can locum, go to Australia. I do like cricket, not very good at it, but would like to go to Australia and maybe, you know, bowl a couple of leggies. But yeah, I think I don't know yet. I haven't made up that decision of what I want to do.
Fair. Cal, I think the thing that is abundantly clear from this conversation is what an amazingly empathetic person you are, how your passion for both wanting to help educate young minds and show them the art of the possible with Meducators, how your journey into medicine and the way in which you had your work experience and then brought that into what you're doing now is incredibly powerful. And I think that where you have really shown others the art of the possible, I'm hoping that this gives another lens on that to show other people further afield that there are other opportunities and places that they can get involved, and that, you know, there is an impact to be made, no matter, you know, it just tends to be, in your case, there's a limitation on time,
Yeah.
but I think that there is a definite clarity that there is an impact to still be made. And thank you so much, man. Like you're you know, it's pretty inspirational. I'm not going to lie, what you're achieving and what you're doing.
So yeah, for me, it's just it's another day for me. But sometimes you kind of need to sit back and reflect, and maybe what you just said there makes me realise I probably have done okay. But it's for everyone out there as well. When we run our workshops for these people too, what we want to tell them is exactly what you've said. You can have so many successes, but if there are students that we have that might not want to go into medicine career, that's a win for us as well. We don't want them to we're not trying to sway their decision, or if they want to be an engineer, a doctor, you know, a nurse, a lawyer, whatever that may be. If they go, actually, this isn't for me, I'd rather do something else. Yeah, that's a big win for us. So yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same time, as you say, by talking about your story, you get to share that there is a development of skills that you can take, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that you end up working in healthcare. You know, going in and having some of these work experiences will provide you with skills in your other career and other things that you might want to take on board. Yeah. So where can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you? How can they learn more? Obviously, you know, this is your moment to give us your...
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we're called Meducators, so it's educators, but with an M in front of it. You can just type us in on Google, Meducators UK. You'll find our website. You can contact us there if you're obviously a teacher or someone at an organisation that, you know, wants your students to learn a bit more, not just about the healthcare kind of career, but all other professional careers. Get in contact with us. We've got an Instagram at Meducators UK, shameless plug there. Twitter, I think, is also at Meducators UK, and TikTok is in process, so that will come soon.
Excellent stuff. Cal, thank you so much for today, man. It's been absolutely awesome talking to you, and thank you for the work that you're doing in both your role as an inspirational figure in education and as a doctor in the UK. So there we have it. You've heard from the man himself. Cal, thank you so much for your inspiration in education and in medicine. It's been an absolute pleasure having today's discussion. I hope that you've really enjoyed it as well. If you want to find Cal, again, at Meducators on all social platforms, and give him a Google. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you again soon.